Welcome to the Center for Languages and Intercultural Communication at Rice University. During the first segment, you learned what vocabulary learning is and what it means to know a word. In this second segment, Kate will elaborate on the application of this knowledge in teaching vocabulary. Let's think about the following questions. What is your goal in teaching vocabulary? What activities do you use in vocabulary instruction? How can you apply what you learned in the first segment to your teaching? In practical application of teaching vocabulary, what should be our goal? Can we expect a student to know a word after introducing it only once?
Research has found that people don't focus on vocabulary instruction as much as grammar in class, but it's been connected to learner success, your ability to convey meaning, and your grammar knowledge. If you have more word knowledge, you have more grammar knowledge. Those are correlated. Also, native speakers identify vocabulary errors as the most serious impediment to understanding. If you mess up grammar, they might still understand you. If you use the wrong word, meaning might not be conveyed at all, right? When we talk about effects of instruction, we have certain goals that we want for us as teachers to encourage their learning. And they're encouraging noticing, retrieval, and creative use. These are the three things that can sort of assist them in learning vocabulary. For noticing, they need opportunities to notice. So just the more times you use the word in class, the more opportunities they have to notice it. The more it occurs in the input, the more you might notice it. So just having it a lot in class is a good idea. Retrieval, every time they process it in some way, either in recognition or production, they have to retrieve it again. So the more times they do this, the more automatic it becomes and the more fluent they become with that word. For creative use, this is both receptive and productive. All three of these are. Every time you see the word in a new situation that you've never seen it in before, that's creative use. And every time you use the word in a situation you've never used it in before, that's creative use. So the more these things happen, even with words they've already encountered, the better they know them and the more likely they are to use them on their own. So keeping that in mind, I want you to look at this list. Do you think doing this with words has a positive effect on learning, a negative effect, or no effect on vocabulary learning? And most of these are for initial stages. Here we go. So research has found these things. I put the little squiggle here because obviously repetitions are good, but doing this is actually better. And we'll talk about that in a second when we talk about repetitions.
So now we know that we can't expect a student to know a word after introducing it only once. What other misconceptions are there?
One is elaborating on word meaning, which is pleasantness ratings, providing synonyms, answering questions about meaning, all of those things. One is copying words down while trying to learn them initially, and repetitions. Basically, if you asked them to do a task that gives excessive attention to meaning, they don't have any room left to process form. But what really happened here was for those of you who did worse and were focusing excessively on form, you didn't have any processing resources left to focus on meaning, and so you didn't remember as many of the words. Basically, anything that gives excessive attention to meaning takes away attention to form, and anything that gives excessive attention to form takes away attention to meaning. So research shows writing words while learning new words, so if you write the form down immediately, the fact that you're doing two different things, processing and writing, those are two different modes. It's exhausting to your processing resources. So this is not to say that students should never ever write a word down, obviously. It's just saying when you're initially teaching them words, don't let them write them down. And it will be more effective in the long run because they're not doing so many things at once. So if all of their processing is focused on what does it sound like, what is it, how can I say it, and not writing. So another way to think about this is that how much meaning are they actually attaching to it when they're writing it down in the first place? Think about, are they writing it down without thinking about what it means, or are they just copying letters? You want the activity to be involving both form and meaning. So if you wait, there might be activating more meaning later if they write it down instead of just copying what it looks like. It's another way to think about it. So as far as amount of repetition, Barcroft says to present new words frequently and repeatedly, as much as you can. Frequently means not just once or twice, so don't just teach them a word once or twice and then expect that they know it. So it might feel like you're doing the same thing over and over again, but you can use increasing the number of repetitions is more beneficial than increasing the length. So having it come up in more class periods, for example, instead of just talking about it a lot in one class period, is actually more beneficial, especially if those are in different contexts. So repeatedly, do it over and over again. And also, if you think about it, it's easier to use words in contexts you haven't done it before as they advance through the course because they know more and you can do more with it.
How do we apply all the knowledge from today to our daily instruction? We typically present the material, have classroom activities, then see if students learn the content.
So let's talk about presentation methods. Well, this is from students are accustomed to looking at translated lists, like we've already talked about. Their textbook provides them at the end of every chapter with a list of words in Spanish and a list of words in English. There are a lot of other options, right? And you're probably already doing a lot of these, but I'm going to list them anyway. You can present vocabulary with pictures. You can present vocabulary with real-world items, like this is a piece of paper, right? Providing definitions in the L1 or L2, which I know we avoid a lot of the time if we're trying to stay in language, but it's another way of doing it. Giving or providing definitions where you describe it too. Giving a series of examples of meaning in the second language. Having students prepare ahead of time and giving mini presentations on target vocabulary. I think this could be particularly relevant to professional courses. And providing context through reading and focused activities, which we're going to look at more in depth. But I know you're probably already doing a lot of this. We all do these things. But what's important is to not just do one of them. Don't rely on just one. Try to vary this as much as possible. Because if they run into the same word in each of these contexts, they're much more likely to know it. One, because they saw it many times. And two, because they've had to process it in a lot of different ways. So activities. We've been saying this all along, but asking them to do too much right away can get in their way, right? Excessive attention to meaning, excessive attention to form, anything that's sort of beyond their abilities in that moment. So it makes sense to progress from less demanding to more demanding tasks, which is what I was sort of saying a second ago, but it will make more sense now. So providing students with the context from the very beginning, as we said back when we were talking about memory, can prime them for both the forms that they might already know and the meaning. So saying, even if it's just, today we're going to talk about going to the store. That just made their brain activate everything they know about going to the store. Consider processing demands. So some activities are less demanding processing-wise than others. Matching information exchange is less demanding. More demanding, creative use in new situations, asking them to maybe write a composition with a word that they now know. And then also crossing modes. So if they learned the word in reading, asking them to use it in a spoken exercise is more demanding. If they learned the word from listening, asking them to do it in a written exercise is more demanding. Consider how activities can draw their attention to different types of knowledge. Do they need to focus on form? Do they need to focus on meaning? And then what do you want to assess them on following? Aiming your activities at different types of knowledge helps. And make connections between type of knowledge and task type. So if they've already learned these words, but we have this problem where they keep using the same words over and over again, having them do tasks where those words are inappropriate might help their pragmatic knowledge of those words. So thinking about this type of thing, their processing capabilities and types of word knowledge can be really helpful for both doing activities and assessing them, because maybe we have more of an understanding of what we can expect them to know at any given time. And we don't have time to talk about assessment, but I'm going to tell you about it really quick. But basically, I brought this study up because there are different ways to target word knowledge, right? So if you don't just test production, you also maybe have a listening aspect to your exam, and then you're testing recognition. So think about where they are. They use recall for production, but think about where they are in their word knowledge. How long have they been working with it? Can you really expect them to produce it in certain ways? Do you need to test creative use of recognition, something? And focus your assessment on what you can expect them to know. So basically the takeaway from their study, which we're not going to do obviously, is that recognition comes before production, which we already knew, and that passive becomes before active. So being able to recognize it and also think about it in relationship to their L1 is easier for them at first. That makes sense, because that's how their language network is organized, as we established in the memory section. So consider what you can expect them to do, and focusing assessment towards that will be more successful for them and more successful for you, probably, unless you want to challenge them in creative use, which is a good idea too. But sort of understanding the way that the learning curve works, recognition, then production, less demanding, more demanding, can be helpful. So that's it.
Thank you.
In this video, you learned to present new words frequently and repeatedly, to consider processing resources, to consider connections between task type and type of vocabulary knowledge, to understand the incremental nature of vocabulary learning, and to make time for vocabulary learning at all levels. Thank you for watching at the Center for Languages and Intercultural Communication at Rice University.